And terrible news from the economic side of things. Over 455,000 South Africans lost their jobs in the second quarter of 2019. This period stretches between April and June this year. Now, according to Statistics South Africa, these latest figures push the country's unemployment rate to a staggering 29%. This means the number of unemployed South Africans is now up to 6.7 million people. Most of the 455,000 jobs lost were from household, transport, mining, and finance sectors. For more on the story, let's talk now to Johann van Tonder, an economist from Momentum Investments. Johann, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. 29%, that's a staggering number. What are your first thoughts when you think about that number?
Yes, unfortunately, it's a very bad number, and as that SI says, it's a highest number in 11 years, but they've only been measuring it for 11 years, so it might be even for a much longer period than 11 years. So one of the biggest problems that caused this high unemployment was the growth in the labor force. The labor force consists of the total unemployed and the total employed, and that basically increased to 23 million or 600,000 people over the past year. And that increase can mainly be attributed to new people who enter the job market, and then also a lot of people who's entered the job market for a second or third time in a desperate move to find jobs.
Yeah, well, I saw these numbers and I immediately thought of the second State of the Nation address this year, where we had the president talk about his 2030 dream, that vision of creating, 2 million jobs by 2030. How feasible is that now at this point?
Well, a lot have to change in order to achieve that, if it's going to be achieved. We can't carry on with the current policies in the economy and expect that we will achieve that target. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we just heard about Eskom's losses and all the reasons for that. But without a fully functioning Eskom and certainty in the economy about economic policies, the investments that's going to be needed for the job creation simply is not going to happen. So we're going to have to do a lot more from a policy perspective to entice our companies to actually invest and create the jobs, and also to become entrepreneurs. Otherwise, it's just going to remain a dream.
Yeah, I want you to maybe unpack what you mean from a policy point of view. So essentially what I'm trying to find now is the blind spots that we're missing in how we start to really create meaningful jobs in South Africa. Specific policy points that you think we need to look at.
Okay, there's quite a number of things. For example, it's much easier to import goods than to produce the goods. It's also cheaper to import a lot of goods than to produce it ourselves. So as a result, what's happening, we're importing, and while we import, we actually export our jobs to other countries. So we should actually make it much easier to produce the goods and services in South Africa. So that's one of the reasons. The second one is we've been talking about the skills gap in the economy. We just look at the unemployment stats. Stats SA mentioned that only 2.2% of graduates are unemployed. Only 2.2%. So it means that we don't have sufficient number of skills in order to fill the gaps where it's needed. And also, if we look at the jobs that were created, more than half of them were in the managerial level. So we're struggling to find the right skills for the jobs, given the fourth industrial revolution, as well as a lot of what's happening in other industries such as mining and so on, where the number of jobs are actually declining.
Yeah.
And then what we need to, apart from education and job creation, we've got the cost of money, which is just too high at this point for investments to be feasible and viable. So it's just not happening. And also, if you're going to change the constitution for land reform, the question would be what's going to change next?
Right. Well, let's do this. And unfortunately, that's all the time I have, Johann. But thank you so much for joining us. Some really important points that you've raised: the skills gap, land reform, and serious policy direction that needs to be found in the country. Johann van Tonder, the researcher and economist at Momentum Investments.